22 years. Silas Thorne stood in the doorway of the nursery, oil lamp trembling in his hand. Dust lay thick on the cradle. A child's gown hung from a peg, yellowed with age, never worn past 3 days. The window was frosted shut, hadn't opened since 1869. He set the lamp on the sill. The flame guttered, casting shadows across tiny handprints pressed into the wallpaper. His son's, Thomas. 3 days old when God took him. Margaret buried beside him, her blood soaked into the sheets Silas burned in the yard. Still waiting, he whispered to the dark. His boots echoed down the empty hall. 12 rooms in this house. No voices, just wind against glass and the creak of wealth settling into silence. Then, a sound, thin, desperate, a baby's cry. Silas froze at the front door. Through the frosted window, red smears in the snow, handprints, bloody knees dragging toward his gate. He opened the door. A woman collapsed at his feet, something bundled against her chest. Her lips were blue, her eyes hunted. "You're safe now," Silas whispered. Neither of them believed it. Silas carried her, not because she asked, she hadn't spoken, but because her legs gave out on the porch. The baby made small sounds against her chest, mewling like a kit fox. Silas's hands shook. He hadn't held a woman in 22 years, hadn't held anything that breathed and needed him. "Get Doc Brennan," he barked at his foreman through the door. "Now!" Inside, the fire was low. He'd let it burn down to coals. No point feeding a flame for one man. He kicked the grate open, threw on pine splits. Sparks rose. The woman flinched at the sound. "Easy," Silas said. "You're inside." He laid her on the rug by the hearth. Her coat was frozen stiff. He peeled it back, careful, like skinning game, and the baby spilled into view. 4 months old, maybe. Face gray as creek stone. Eyes half shut. Silas's throat closed. Thomas had looked like that. The third day, before he stopped breathing. "Don't," Silas whispered, to the baby, to God. "Don't you dare." The woman's hand shot out, gripped his wrist. Her nails drew blood. "He's mine," she rasped. "I know. Don't take him." "I won't." She let go, collapsed back. Her palms were shredded, skin peeled to meat, frozen black at the edges. Frostbite, deep. Silas had seen it on cattle caught in blizzards. You either cut the rod out or watched it climb. The door slammed. Doc Alma Brennan blew in with the cold, snowflakes melting in her gray braid. 58 years old, wire spectacles, hands steady as cast iron. "Lord have mercy," she said. She crawled, Silas told her. 2 miles, maybe more. Alma knelt, pressed fingers to the woman's throat, pulled back the baby's eyelid, listened to his chest. Her face stayed flat, professional, but Silas saw the tightness around her mouth. "Frostbite on her hands and knees," Alma said. "Feet too, likely. Baby's hypothermic. Another hour and you'd be digging 2 graves." Silas stood, walked to the window, stared at his own reflection in the frozen glass. "Heat water," Alma ordered. "Clean linens. Blankets. Wool, not cotton. And whiskey." "For her?" "For you. You look half dead yourself." The woman didn't speak for 2 hours. Alma worked in silence, washing blood, wrapping wounds, spooning warm milk into the baby's mouth, 1 drop at a time. The child whimpered, then latched onto the spoon, swallowed, again. His color came back, gray to pink to almost human. Silas sat across the room, frozen in the chair where he'd spent 1,000 nights alone. He watched the woman breathe, in, out, her ribs pressing sharp against her dress. She was thin, rail fence thin, like she hadn't eaten in days, maybe weeks. Her dark hair had come loose, tangled with ice and pine needles. 25 years old, he guessed, maybe younger. Hard to tell when someone looked that haunted. The baby started to cry, not loud, just a soft, exhausted sound. The woman's eyes opened. "Sam," she whispered. Alma placed the baby in her arms. The woman pulled him close, buried her face in his blanket. Her shoulders shook. No sound, just the tremor of someone who'd forgotten how to cry out loud. Silas looked away. "How far did she come?" Alma asked, quiet. "I followed the tracks back to the tree line. Lost them in the drifts." "She wasn't running from weather." "Oh, no." "You planning to ask what she's running from?" Silas didn't answer. He stood, walked to the kitchen, came back with a plate, bread, butter, cold beef, set it on the floor beside the woman. She stared at it like it might disappear. "Eat," Alma said gently. "Baby needs you strong." The woman took the bread, bit into it, chewed slow, like she'd forgotten the taste of food. Tears ran down her face, but she didn't stop eating. Alma stood, touched Silas's shoulder. "I'll check back in the morning," she said. "Keep the fire high. Watch her breathing." And Silas, "What? When's the last time you held a child?" Silas said nothing. Alma nodded, left. Midnight came. Silas stayed in the chair, told himself he'd leave once she fell asleep. Once he was sure the baby wouldn't stop breathing. But he didn't move. The woman slept with her back to the fire, baby tucked against her chest. Her hand rested on Sam's head, protective even in sleep. Her other hand lay open on the rug, bandaged fingers curled like she was still gripping something invisible. Silas studied her face, pale, hollow-cheeked, but young, younger than Margaret had been, younger than anyone should look when they've crawled through snow to save a life. The baby stirred, made a small sound. Silas leaned forward, the woman's eyes opened, found him in the dark. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she looked at the table beside her, fresh milk in a tin cup, another plate of bread, clean bandages stacked neat as Sunday prayer books. She looked back at Silas. "You stayed," she whispered. "I did." "Why?" Silas didn't have an answer. Or he had too many. So he said the only true thing he knew, because someone should. Dawn broke cold and white. Silas woke slumped in the chair, neck stiff. The woman was awake, sitting up, nursing the baby with milk Alma had left. Her eyes were clearer now. Still afraid, but steady. She looked at Silas. "Thank you," she said. 2 words, quiet as snow falling. Silas nodded, rose to stoke the fire. His hands were shaking again. 52 years old, and his hands shook like a boy's. "What's your name?" he asked, back turned. Silence. Then, "Ruth." "I'm Silas." "I know, everyone knows Silas Thorne." He turned. "That's supposed to scare you?" Ruth looked at the baby in her arms. "Nothing scares me anymore. I already lost everything." Silas felt something crack open in his chest, small, sharp, like ice breaking under boot heel. "Not everything," he said, looking at the baby. Ruth's face softened. First time he'd seen anything but fear in her eyes. "No," she whispered. "Not everything." She pressed her lips to Sam's head. The baby yawned, tiny fist opening and closing against her chest. Silas looked away, cleared his throat. "You hungry?" "Starving." "I'll make coffee." He left before she could see his face. Before she could see that for the first time in 22 years, his eyes were wet. 3 days passed. Ruth's hands scabbed over. The black edges turned pink, then pale. Alma said she'd keep all her fingers, maybe lose a nail or two, but she'd heal. Ruth nodded like she had expected worse. She refused to stay idle. Second morning, Silas found her in the kitchen, one-handed, kneading dough against the pine counter. Her bandages were spotted red. "You're bleeding," he said from the doorway. "I'm baking." "You should rest." "I've rested enough." She shaped the dough, set it to rise. "I won't be a burden." You're not." "I am. A strange woman with a baby, eating your food, sleeping by your fire." She turned to face him. "I'll earn my keep." Silas wanted to tell her she didn't have to, that he had money enough to feed 50 people and still die rich. But the set of her jaw told him she needed this, needed to be useful, needed to prove she wasn't just something broken he'd dragged inside. "All right," he said, "but wrap those hands tighter." Ruth almost smiled. That afternoon, Alma came with clean bandages and a basket of baby clothes, soft cotton things her own children had outgrown 30 years back. "He's growing already," Alma said, holding Sam up to the light. The baby kicked, made a sound like laughter. "Strong lungs?" Ruth sat by the fire, watching. Her face was still thin, but the fear had dulled to something quieter, wary, waiting. Alma looked at Silas, standing stiff by the window. "Come here," she said. "I'm fine where I am." "Silas Thorne, get over here," he obeyed. Always did with Alma. She'd delivered half the county, buried the other half, and earned the right to order men around. She held Sam out to him. "Take him." Silas stepped back. "I don't—" "You don't what? Have hands?" Alma pushed the baby toward him. "He won't break." Silas looked at Ruth. She nodded. He took the baby, awkward, too stiff. Sam was warm and wriggling and impossibly small. Silas's hands, rough from leather and rope, felt like they'd crush him. He held his breath. Sam looked up at him, wide brown eyes, curious, unafraid. Then the baby's hand opened, closed around Silas's thumb. Something in Silas's chest split open. Thomas had done that, once, on the second day. Gripped his father's finger like he was holding the whole world. "He's strong," Silas whispered. "He is," Ruth said quietly. "He has to be." Silas looked at her, saw the truth in her face. Wherever she'd come from, whoever was behind her, this baby was all she had left. And she'd crawled through 2 miles of snow to keep him breathing. He handed Sam back, gentle, careful. "You're doing fine," Alma said, packing her bag. "Both of you." After she left, the house felt warmer. That night, Ruth hummed, soft, low, a song without words. She sat by the fire, rocking Sam in her arms. And the sound filled the empty hall like water filling a dry well. Silas stood in the kitchen, hands flat on the counter. He hadn't heard music in this house since Margaret died. Hadn't allowed it. Music meant life, and life meant remembering what he'd lost. But Ruth's humming wasn't joyful. It was survival, a mother singing to keep her child calm in the dark. Silas found himself listening. In the pantry, flour, salt, coffee, dried beef. He pulled down what he needed. His hands moved without thought, making biscuits the way his own mother had, 50 years ago, in Kentucky. Before the war, before Montana, before he'd learned that men could own land but never keep what mattered. The dough came together. He shaped it, set it in the Dutch oven, buried it in coals. 20 minutes later, the smell of baking bread filled the house. Ruth appeared in the kitchen doorway, Sam asleep against her shoulder. "You cook?" she asked. "Used to. Long time ago. Smells like home." Silas didn't ask where home was, didn't ask what she was running from. Some things you let people tell when they're ready. He pulled the biscuits from the coals. Set them on a plate, still hot. Ruth sat at the table, shifted Sam to one arm, took a biscuit with her free hand, bit into it, closed her eyes. "Thank you," she said. Silas sat across from her, watched her eat, watched the baby sleep, watched the firelight make shadows on the wall. For the first time in 22 years, his house didn't feel like a tomb. The next morning, Ruth asked about the locked door. They were in the hall, Silas carrying firewood, Ruth folding the blankets she'd slept in. She stopped at the door at the end of the corridor, pressed her palm flat against the oak. "What's in here?" Silas's hands tightened on the wood. "Nothing. Doesn't sound like nothing." She looked at him. "I hear you in there. At night." He set the firewood down, wiped his hands on his trousers. "It's private." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean." "It's fine." He picked up the wood, walked past her. "Just leave it be." But that night, Ruth found the key. It was hanging on a nail behind the kitchen door, small, brass, worn smooth. She held it up to the lamplight, thought about putting it back. Then she thought about Silas's face when she'd asked. The way he'd looked, like she'd put a knife in his ribs. She walked to the locked door, slid the key into the lock. It turned. The nursery was frozen in time. Dust lay thick on everything. A cradle by the window, carved with roses. A rocking horse, mane made of real horsehair. Tiny clothes folded on a shelf. Gowns, booties, a christening blanket. Ruth stepped inside, Sam heavy in her arms. On the windowsill, an oil lamp. The only clean thing in the room. The glass was polished, the wick trimmed. Someone had been lighting it, recently. Ruth set Sam in the cradle, just for a moment, and lit the lamp. The flame caught, warm, golden. She looked around, saw the room as it must have been. Bright, waiting, full of hope. A child's room. A son's room. His name was Thomas. Ruth spun. Silas stood in the doorway. His face was gray. "I'm sorry," Ruth said quickly. "I shouldn't have." 3 days old. Silas stepped inside. His boots left prints in the dust. Born January 9th, 1869. Died January 12th. Ruth's throat closed. "My wife Margaret." She bled out. "Too much, too fast." Alma tried, but there's only so much. He stopped, swallowed. "The baby lived 3 days. I thought that meant he'd make it." "Where were you?" Ruth asked quietly. "Billings, land deal." "Margaret begged me to stay, but I—" His voice cracked. "I told her I'd be back in 3 days. Ruth picked up Sam, held him close. "I got the telegram on the 4th day," Silas said. "Came home to 2 graves, fresh dirt. Alma had already buried them. I'm so sorry. I kept the room ready, like a fool, like they might come back if I just—" He couldn't finish. Ruth stepped closer. "You loved them. I failed them. No, you just weren't there." "Same thing." Ruth looked at the cradle, at the lamp burning soft and steady, at Silas standing in the doorway of his grief, 22 years deep. "May I clean it?" she asked. Silas looked at her. "Why?" "Because someone loved here once." She touched the cradle. "And maybe they still can." By nightfall, the nursery was clean. Ruth had dusted, swept, washed the window. The cradle gleamed. The lamp burned on the sill, steady, unafraid. She placed Sam inside. He yawned, curled on his side, slept. Silas stood in the doorway, watching. "He looks—" Silas couldn't finish. "Safe," Ruth whispered. "He looks safe." She sat on the floor beside the cradle, one hand on the rockers, and began to hum. The same song from before. Low, soft. Silas turned to leave. "You can stay," Ruth said, "if you want." He stayed, stood in the doorway, watched Ruth rock the cradle, watched the baby sleep, watched the lamp burn, and for the first time in 22 years, the room breathed. 4 days in, Silas rode to town. He needed supplies, flour, sugar, lamp oil, things he'd let run low because a man alone didn't need much. But now there were 3 mouths in his house, and the baby needed milk, and Ruth had been making bread every morning like it was prayer. The ride to Lewiston took an hour. Snow packed hard on the trail, sky and gray. His horse, a bay mare named Constance, picked her way through the drifts without complaint. Town was quiet, Saturday, but cold enough to keep folks inside. Silas tied Constance outside the general store, stomped snow from his boots, pushed through the door. The bell jingled. Conversation stopped. 3 men at the counter, ranchers by the look of them, turned to stare. The shopkeeper, Abel Crutcher, looked up from his ledger. His face went carefully blank. "Mr. Thorne," Abel said, too polite. "What can I do for you?" Silas pulled a list from his pocket. Flour, 20 pounds. Sugar, 10. Lamp oil, 2 gallons. Coffee if you've got it fresh. Abel nodded. Started pulling items from the shelves. The other men went back to talking, quieter now, like they didn't want to be overheard. Silas pretended not to notice. He studied a display of canned peaches, listened. Heard she made it as far as Iron Creek. Baby with her? They say, Marshall's offering $50. Silas's hand tightened on the peach tin. Abel set the flour on the counter. That everything, Mr. Thorne? Marshall been through here? Silas asked, voice level. The store went quiet again. Abel cleared his throat. 2 days ago, federal man, Marshall Clayton Hargrave, asking about a woman, said she was wanted. For what? Didn't specify. Abel folded his arms. But he seemed real interested when I mentioned you'd sent for Doc Brennan in the middle of the night. Silas met his eyes. I help a woman and her baby out of the cold. That's my business. Well, Marshall might see it different. Let him. One of the ranchers, older man, face like cracked leather, spoke up. Thorne, you know what you're doing. I know I'm buying flour. I mean with the woman. Silas turned. What's your name? Garrett. Well, Garrett, I'll thank you to mind your own affairs. It becomes my affair when federal law's involved. Garrett stepped closer. That woman's trouble. Whole town knows it. You'd be wise to hand her over before... Before what? Garrett stopped, looked at Silas's face, backed down. Just saying. Man's got a reputation to think about. Silas tossed coins on the counter. My reputation's my own. Now load my horse. Abel signaled to his boy, who carried the supplies outside. Silas followed, jaw tight. As he mounted Constance, Abel called from the door. Mr. Thorne, Marshall said he'd be back. This week, likely, with men. Silas nodded, rode off. Behind him, the men's voices rose again, speculating. Judging, he didn't look back. The ride home felt longer. Silas's mind worked through possibilities. A federal marshal didn't ride this far into Montana territory for nothing. And if he was offering money, someone wanted Ruth bad enough to make it worth the trip. But why? Woman and a baby. Wanted. Running. Could be theft. Could be worse. Silas realized he didn't care. Whatever she'd done, she'd crawled through 2 miles of snow to save a child. That was the only fact that mattered. Still, he needed to know. Ruth was in the kitchen when he returned, rolling dough for biscuits. Sam lay in a basket by the fire, watching the flames with serious eyes. The house smelled like yeast and wood smoke and something close to normal. Silas set the supplies on the counter, unwrapped the flour, sugar, lamp oil. Ruth wiped her hands on her apron. You were gone a long time. Town talk, she stiffened. About me? Yes. Silence. Ruth picked up the rolling pin, set it down again. Her hands were shaking. What did they say? She asked quietly. That a marshal's looking for you? Federal man, name's Hargrave. Ruth's face went white. She gripped the counter. He's coming here, she whispered. Seems so. Ruth turned, walked to the window, stared out at the snow. Her breath fogged the glass that Silas realized was no longer frosted shut. The warmth of the house had melted the ice. You could see clear through now, see the road, see anyone coming. I need to leave, Ruth said. Tonight. In this weather, with a baby? I've done it before. You then almost died. Better than what Hargrave will do. She turned to face him. Her eyes were hard, desperate. You don't understand. He won't arrest me. He'll kill me. Silas felt something cold settle in his gut. Why? Ruth looked at Sam, at the baby lying safe and warm by the fire. Then she looked at Silas. Because I know the truth, she said. And the truth will hang a rich man's son. She told him everything. They sat at the kitchen table, Ruth with her hands folded tight, Silas with his coffee gone cold. My husband's name was Daniel Carver, Ruth began. A carpenter, good man, gentle. We lived in Billings, small house near the rail yard. Silas nodded. Let her talk. 6 months ago, there was a murder. A merchant named Hollis owned the dry goods store. Someone shot him in the street, took his cash box. Left him to bleed out in the mud. She paused, swallowed. Daniel was working late that night, building cabinets for the hotel. He heard the shot. Ran outside, saw a man standing over the body. Young man, blonde hair, fancy coat. The killer? Yes, the killer looked right at Daniel, smiled, then walked away. Ruth's hands were shaking now. She gripped them tighter. Daniel told the sheriff, described the man. The sheriff said he'd look into it. She laughed, bitter, dry. He looked into it, were you all right? Came back 2 days later with a warrant for Daniel. Silas leaned forward. They arrested your husband? Arrested him, tried him, hung him, 3 weeks from start to finish. And on what evidence? A witness. The real killer, his name is Thomas Vickers. He testified that Daniel shot Hollis, said he saw it happen, said Daniel tried to rob the store earlier that day. And the jury believed him? Ruth's eyes were wet now, angry. Thomas Vickers is the nephew of Sheriff William Vickers, his uncle, the man who arrested Daniel, who brought the charges, who made sure the trial happened fast and quiet. And Silas felt the picture coming together, felt the rot beneath it. You tried to testify, he said. I did. I told them Daniel was with me that night, that he couldn't have done it, that I saw Thomas Vickers leaving the scene. She wiped her eyes. They called me a liar, said I was a grieving wife trying to save her husband. The judge wouldn't hear it. So they hung him. January 3rd. I was there, watched him drop. Her voice cracked. He looked at me before they put the hood on, mouthed, I love you. Silas looked away, gave her a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, cold. After the hanging, I went to the territorial judge, tried to file an appeal, but the sheriff got word. He came to my house, told me if I spoke another word, I'd hang beside Daniel. So you ran. Not alone. My sister Emma, she lived in Bozeman. She had a baby, 4 months old. Her husband died of fever that winter, so it was just her and Sam. Ruth looked at the baby, sleeping by the fire. She helped me. We ran together, took the back roads, tried to make it to the Canadian line. What happened? Ruth's face broke. They caught us. 10 miles south of here. Emma told me to run, took Sam, handed him to me, told me to go. I heard the shot. I didn't look back. She couldn't finish. Silas reached across the table, took her hand. Rough, bandaged, trembling. She made me promise, Ruth whispered. Promise to keep Sam safe. He's all I have left of her, of Daniel, of everything. And now the marshal's coming. He's not a real marshal. Hargrave works for the Vickers family. They've got money, cattle, land, half the territorial government in their pocket. Thomas Vickers killed that merchant, and his uncle paid to cover it up. I'm the only one left who knows. Silas let the silence stretch. Then, what will Hargrave do if he finds you? Ruth met his eyes. He'll take Sam, say I kidnapped him, say I'm insane with grief. Then he'll put me in the ground somewhere quiet and no one will ask questions. Silas stood, walked to the window, stared out at the snow. Behind him, Ruth spoke. I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. But I thought maybe here, just for a few days, Sam could be safe. He is safe. Not if they come. Silas turned, looked at her, at the baby, at the life that had, for 4 days, made his house feel like a home. They'll come, he said quietly. Probably tomorrow. Ruth nodded, started to stand. Then I'll leave tonight. Sit down. She froze. Silas walked to the corner of the room, pulled his rifle from the rack. Winchester repeater, oiled and clean, untouched for a decade. He checked the chamber, loaded it, set it by the door. Ruth stared. What are you doing? Silas looked at her, deciding what kind of man I am. That night, Ruth couldn't sleep. She lay by the fire with Sam curled against her chest, listening to the wind test the windows. Every creak made her flinch. Every shadow looked like men on horses. Near midnight, she heard footsteps. Silas moving through the house, not pacing, just walking, slow, like a man measuring distance he'd covered too many times. The footsteps stopped at the nursery door. Ruth rose, careful not to wake Sam, wrapped him in blankets, followed the sound. She found Silas standing in Thomas's room. The lamp was lit. He held it in both hands, staring at the empty cradle like it might speak. You don't have to do this, Ruth said from the doorway. Silas didn't turn. Do what? Protect me. Risk everything. I'm nothing to you. You're in my house. That's not a reason. He set the lamp down. Finally looked at her. His face was carved hollow by shadow. Why are you helping me? Ruth pressed. The town thinks I'm a criminal. The law's hunting me. You could hand me over, keep your land, keep your name clean. Silas sat in the rocking chair, the one Margaret had used 22 years ago. The wood creaked under his weight. I wasn't there. he said quietly. Ruth stepped into the room. What? 22 years ago. My wife was 9 months heavy with child. I had a land deal in Billings, chance to double my holdings. She begged me to stay. His voice was flat, dead. I told her 3 days. I'd be back in 3 days. Ruth's throat tightened. The baby came early. Margaret started bleeding. Alma tried to stop it, but he stopped, swallowed. Thomas lived 3 days. I got Alma's telegram on the 4th. By the time I rode home, they were already in the ground. Silas, I chose land over my son's first breath, money over holding my wife's hand while she died. He looked up at Ruth. His eyes were dry, too dry, like he'd cried himself empty years ago. So when I ask myself why I'm helping you, the answer's simple. Because I wasn't there when it mattered, and I've been trying to forgive myself ever since. Ruth felt something crack in her chest. She sat on the floor beside the cradle, still holding Sam. So you're saving me to forgive yourself, she said quietly. Silas didn't flinch from it. Yes. That's not mercy, that's selfish. I know. Silence stretched between them. The lamp flame guttered. Somewhere outside, a coyote called. Ruth looked down at Sam, asleep in her arms, then back at Silas. Selfish or not, she said, I'll take it. Sam needs you. Silas's face twisted. He covered it with his hands. I don't know if I can do this, he whispered. Do what? Lose again. Ruth should have left it there, should have let the man keep one shred of dignity. But she'd crawled through snow to save a child. She'd watched her husband hang. She'd held her sister while she bled out in the road. She was done with lies, even kind ones. How did you get this ranch? She asked. Silas's hands dropped. He looked at her, wary. What? This land, 12,000 acres. A man doesn't build an empire on good intentions. His jaw tightened. I worked for it. How? Ruth, how? Silas stood, walked to the window, pressed his palm against the cold glass. I loaned money, he said finally. After the war, men needed capital. I had it, charged fair rates, mostly. Mostly? There was a widow. Her husband died of cholera. She had a small ranch, 200 acres, good water. She needed money to keep it through winter. I loaned her $500. Ruth waited. She couldn't pay it back. Interest piled up. I gave her extensions, but after 2 years, he stopped. I foreclosed. Legal, clean, took the land. And her? She moved to Butte, worked in a boarding house, I heard. Ruth felt the air leave her lungs. You took a widow's home. Yes. And built your fortune on it. Yes. He turned to face her. No excuses, no deflection. I told myself business is business, that the law was on my side, that I'd earned it. Ruth stared at him. At this man who'd opened his door to her, who'd held Sam like the baby might break, who'd stayed up all night to make sure they kept breathing. And now a widow's at your door, she said softly. Silas's face crumpled. I know. With a baby. I know. Ruth felt something strange twist in her chest. Not pity, not quite forgiveness. Something sharper, truer. Maybe God has a sense of humor, she said. Silas almost laughed. Bitter, broken. If he does, it's cruel. Or fair. They sat in silence. The lamp burned low. Sam stirred, made a small sound, settled back into sleep. Ruth stood, walked to the cradle, laid Sam inside, adjusted the blankets, watched the baby's chest rise and fall. You can't save your son, she said without turning, but you can save mine. Silas's voice came rough. What if I fail again? Ruth looked at him, at this man carved hollow by grief and guilt. This man who'd built an empire and lost everything that mattered. This man who was choosing, finally, to stay. Then we fail together, she said. Later, near dawn, Silas found Ruth in the kitchen. She was making coffee, hands steady now, face calm. I need to ask you something, Silas said. All right. If Hargrave comes, if he has papers, legal authority, federal backing, what do you want me to do? Ruth poured the coffee, set a cup in front of him, met his eyes. I want you to decide what kind of man you are, she said. The one who forecloses on widows, or the one who opens the door when someone's dying in the snow? Silas picked up the cup, didn't drink, just held it, feeling the warmth. What if I can't tell the difference anymore? Ruth sat across from him. Then you already know. Outside, the sky began to pale. Gray light crept through the windows. Clear glass, no frost. The house was warm. The coffee was hot. Sam slept safe in the nursery. And somewhere on the road from Lewiston, a marshal was coming. Silas looked at Ruth. How long do you think we have? A day, maybe 2. Not enough time to run? No. Then we stand. Ruth's eyes filled. You'll lose everything. Silas thought of Thomas, of Margaret, of 22 years standing in an empty nursery, holding a lamp, waiting for ghosts. I've already lost everything, he said. 22 years ago. He stood, walked to the corner, checked his rifle again, loaded extra shells into his pocket. This time, he said quietly, I'm here. Dawn came quiet, too quiet. Silas stood on the porch, rifle across his chest, watching the eastern road. Frost glittered on the fence posts. The sky was pale as bone, no wind, no birds, just silence, waiting to break. Behind him, through the window, Ruth moved through the kitchen, making coffee, feeding Sam, doing the small things that kept terror at bay. At 7 o'clock, Silas saw them. 3 riders, dark shapes against white snow, coming slow, deliberate. He didn't call out, didn't need to. Ruth appeared beside him, Sam bundled against her chest. Her face was stone. It's him, she whispered. I know. You can still... No. The riders approached. Stopped at the gate. Didn't dismount. Marshal Clayton Hargrave sat center on a gray gelding. 44 years old, clean-shaven, badge polished bright enough to catch the sun. His eyes were the color of creek ice. Pale, cold, empty of mercy. 2 deputies flanked him, young men, hired guns pretending to be law. Hargrave touched his hat brim, polite, deadly. Mr. Thorne. Marshal. Heard you've got a visitor. I've got a woman and a child recovering from exposure, if that's what you mean. Hargrave smiled, thin, sharp. That woman's wanted, Mr. Thorne. For what? Kidnapping. Ruth's hand found Silas's arm, gripped tight. Silas kept his voice level. That baby's hers. According to the child's legal guardian, it was taken unlawfully. Who's the guardian? Thomas Vickers, the late mother's husband. Ruth made a sound, half sob, half laugh, bitter. Hargrave's eyes flicked to her. Ma'am, I'm here to return the child to his rightful family and escort you back to Billings to face charges. Thomas Vickers murdered a man, Ruth said, voice shaking. My husband was hanged for it. Thomas killed my sister when we ran. And now you're here to finish the job. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Hargrave pulled a folded document from his coat. I've got a writ, signed by Judge Aldrich, Territorial Court. Says the child, Samuel Vickers, is to be returned to his father's custody. Says you, Ruth Carver, are wanted for unlawful flight and interference with justice. He held it up. Official seal, signature in black ink. Legal, Hargrave said. Clean. Silas felt something cold settle in his stomach. The law, the system he'd trusted, the same authority that had protected his land deals, enforced his contracts, built his empire. Now it was hunting an innocent woman. Step aside, Mr. Thorne, Hargrave said. This doesn't concern you. She's in my house. That makes it my concern. I can have you arrested for obstruction. Try. Hargrave's smile faded. You know who I am, Thorne. Federal Marshal. I've got authority from here to the Canadian line. You interfere, I'll seize your assets. Every acre. Every head of cattle. I'll tie your land up in court so long you'll die waiting to see it free. Silas felt the weight of it. 12,000 acres. 300 cattle. A fortune built over 30 years. Everything he'd sacrificed Margaret and Thomas to earn. Hargrave saw the calculation on his face, leaned forward in the saddle. You're a smart man, Thorne. Businessman. You understand numbers. This woman, she's nothing. A widow. No family, no money. No one will miss her. He gestured to Sam. The child goes back to his father. She goes back to face trial. You keep your empire. Everyone wins. Silas looked at Ruth, at her face. Pale, resigned. She'd heard this before. Been told she was nothing. Been erased by men with badges and papers and power. She wasn't looking at Silas. She was looking at Sam. I'll go, Ruth said quietly. Ruth, it's all right. She kissed Sam's head. Her voice cracked. It's all right. No. If I don't, they'll destroy you. She looked at Silas, tears running down her face. You saved us. That's enough. That's more than anyone else did. She started to step forward. Silas's hand shot out, caught her arm, stopped her. No, he said. Silas, please. No. He stepped in front of her, between Ruth and the marshal. His rifle came up, not aimed, but ready. A statement. She's not leaving, Silas said. Hargrave's face went flat. Then I'll take her. No, you won't. That's obstruction of justice, Thorne. There's no justice here. Just a murderer using law to hunt witnesses. One of the deputies reached for his sidearm. Silas's rifle swung toward him. Don't. The deputy froze. Hargrave held up a hand. Calm, controlled. You're making a mistake, Thorne. 3 armed men, 1 old rancher. You think this ends well for you? I think you need to leave my land. So this land won't be yours much longer. Then I'll die on it poor. Hargrave studied him, calculating, weighing. Behind Silas, the front door opened. Doc Alma Brennan stepped onto the porch. She didn't speak, just stood beside Silas, arms folded. Her gray braid lay over her shoulder. Her face was carved from stone. Then footsteps from the barn. Two ranch hands, Jack and Will, men who'd worked Silas's land for a decade, emerged carrying rifles. They didn't aim, just walked to the porch, stood beside Alma, then the cook, Mrs. Chen, then the stable boy. 6 people. Silent. Witnesses. Hargrave's jaw tightened. This is federal business. This is murder dressed up in legal paper, Alma said, her voice carrying cold as wind. And we won't be part of it. You're interfering. I delivered Thomas Vickers 20 years ago. I know what kind of man he is. Alma stepped forward. And I know Ruth Carver. I know what she's running from. You take her, Marshal, and you're complicit in murder. That's slander. Then arrest me. Hargrave looked at the line of people, at their faces, at Silas standing rigid with his rifle. He was outnumbered, not in guns, he could call for more men, but in something deeper, moral authority. The kind that lived in small towns where people knew each other's names, where a woman crawling through snow with a baby meant something. This isn't over, Thorne, Hargrave said quietly, dangerously. I'll be back, with federal authority. With enough men to take this ranch apart board by board. Then I'll be here. Hargrave turned his horse, paused, looked back. You're throwing away everything for a woman you don't even know. Silas met his eyes. No, I'm finally keeping something that matters. The marshal rode off, his deputies followed. They disappeared down the eastern road, swallowed by white distance. For a long moment no one moved, then Ruth's legs gave out. She collapsed, still holding Sam, and the sound that came from her was animal, raw grief and terror released all at once. 22 years of rage. Weeks of running, a sister's blood, a husband's last breath, all of it poured out. Silas caught her, lowered himself to the porch boards, pulled her against his chest. Sam between them, safe. Ruth sobbed into Silas's shoulder, violent, shaking sobs that bent her double. Silas held her. First time in 22 years he'd held anyone who was breaking. You're safe now, he whispered into her hair. Ruth shook her head, couldn't speak. Silas tightened his grip. You're safe. I promise. You're safe. Behind them, Alma wiped her eyes. The ranch hands looked away, giving them privacy. Mrs. Chen went inside, came back with blankets. But Silas didn't move. He held Ruth while she cried, held Sam while the baby whimpered, confused by his mother's grief, held them both like they were the only solid things in the world. And for the first time since Margaret died, Silas Thorne felt the weight of another person's life in his arms, and didn't flinch from it. He chose it. Inside, Ruth couldn't stop shaking. They sat by the fire, Silas, Ruth, Sam. Alma brought whiskey, poured 2 fingers in a tin cup, pressed it into Ruth's hands. Drink. Ruth obeyed. The whiskey burned. She coughed, drank more. He'll come back, she whispered, with more men, with real authority. He'll take everything. Let him try. Silas, you don't understand. The Vickers family, they own half the territory. They have judges, politicians, the governor's ear. They'll bury you. Then I'll be buried. Ruth looked at him, at this man who'd opened his door, who'd confessed his worst sins, who'd stood between her and federal law with nothing but an old rifle and a promise. Why? She asked, voice breaking. Why would you do this? Silas looked at Sam, asleep in Ruth's arms, looked at the baby's small fist curled against her chest. Thought of Thomas, of Margaret, of 22 years of locked doors and empty rooms and fortunes that meant nothing, because I wasn't there when it mattered, he said quietly. And I've spent 22 years trying to forgive myself. Maybe I can't. Maybe I don't deserve to. He met Ruth's eyes. But I can be here now. For you, for Sam, that's all I've got left to give. Ruth started crying again. Quieter this time. She reached out, took Silas's hand. Thank you, she whispered. Silas squeezed her hand, said nothing. Outside, the sun climbed higher. The snow began to melt. Water dripped from the eaves like a clock counting down. And somewhere on the road to Billings, Marshal Hargrave was already writing his report, calling for reinforcements, building a case to destroy a man who'd chosen mercy over law. But inside the house on Iron Creek Ranch, 3 people sat by the fire, a broken rancher, a hunted widow, a baby who didn't know he was the reason 2 strangers had become a family. Alma stood in the doorway, watching them. It's not over, she said softly. Silas looked up. I know. They'll come back, maybe a week, maybe less. I know. You'll lose everything. Silas looked at Ruth, at Sam, at the life that for 7 days had made his house feel like home. I already lost everything, he said. 22 years ago. He stood, walked to the window, placed his hand against the glass. Clear now. No frost, nothing between him and the world. This time, he said, I'm not running. This time, I stay. 3 days passed. No one came. The ranch held its breath. Silas kept watch, rifle by the door, eyes on the eastern road. Jack and Will took shifts in the barn. Alma visited twice daily, checking wounds, bringing news from town. The news wasn't good. Hargraves in Billings, she reported on the second day. Sent telegrams to Helena, the territorial governor. He's building a case. How long do we have? Silas asked. A week, maybe less. Ruth stood by the kitchen window, arms wrapped around herself. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten much, just moved through the house like a ghost, checking on Sam every few minutes, making sure he was still breathing. You should eat, Alma said gently. I'm not hungry. Ruth, I can't. She turned. Her face was gaunt, hollow. Every time I close my eyes, I see Emma. I hear the shot. I feel Sam in my arms, and I can't stop running. Even standing still, I'm running. Alma touched her shoulder. You're safe here. For how long? No one answered. That night, Silas couldn't sleep. He sat in the kitchen, coffee gone cold, staring at his hands. Rough hands. Builder's hands. Hands that had signed foreclosure papers and counted gold, and never once held his son before the boy stopped, breathing. Footsteps. Ruth appeared in the doorway, Sam asleep against her shoulder. She'd wrapped him in the christening blanket from Thomas's room. White linen, embroidered with roses. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. I wasn't sleeping. Ruth sat across from him, adjusted Sam, tucked the blanket tighter. The baby made a soft sound, settled. He's beautiful, Silas said quietly. He looks like Emma, same eyes, same stubborn chin. Ruth smiled, sad, distant. She used to say he came out arguing, hasn't stopped since. Thomas was quiet, Silas said. Didn't cry much. Just watched everything like he was trying to figure the world out before committing to it. Silence settled between them, comfortable now. The silence of two people who'd stopped pretending grief wasn't in the room. Do you think they'd forgive us? Ruth asked. Your wife, my sister, for being here. She gestured at the kitchen, the fire, the baby sleeping safe. For this. Silas thought of Margaret. Her last words, according to Alma, tell him I tried to wait. I don't know, he said honestly, but I think they'd want us to live, even if we don't deserve to, especially then. Ruth looked down at Sam, pressed her lips to his forehead. Emma made me promise. She said, keep him safe. Give him a life I can't. I thought that meant running, getting him to Canada, starting over somewhere no one knew us. And now? Now I think maybe she meant here. Ruth looked around the kitchen, at the clean counters, the stocked pantry, the fire burning steady. Maybe safe isn't a place. Maybe it's people who choose to stay. Silas felt something crack in his chest. Small, clean, like ice breaking under spring sun. You're welcome here, he said, as long as you need. Even when Hargrave comes back? Especially then. Ruth's eyes filled. She looked away, brushed the tears with her free hand. You're going to lose everything because of me. I lost everything 22 years ago. Silas reached across the table, covered her hand with his. What I'm doing now, this is trying to find something worth keeping. Near midnight, Silas went to the nursery. Ruth followed. She didn't ask. Just brought Sam, laid him in the cradle, sat on the floor, beside it, watching the baby sleep. Silas stood by the window. The lamp burned on the sill, steady, golden, unafraid. Outside, snow fell soft, covering tracks, erasing evidence, making the world clean again. I used to come here every night, Silas said. After Margaret died, I'd light the lamp, sit in that chair, talk to him. Thomas? Yes, Silas turned. Stupid, I know, talking to a ghost. It's not stupid. I'd tell him what I did that day, what the ranch looked like, how the cattle were doing. His voice roughened. I'd apologize. Over and over. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I chose wrong. I'm sorry you died without ever knowing your father loved you. Ruth was crying silently, still watching Sam. Did it help? She asked. No, but I couldn't stop. Silas sat in the rocking chair. The one Margaret had used. The one that creaked with memory. I thought if I kept the room ready, if I kept talking, maybe somehow he'd know. Maybe the universe would hear me say I was sorry, and it would count for something. And did it? Silas looked at the cradle. At Sam, sleeping in the same spot Thomas had died. At Ruth, sitting vigil, like Margaret must have, those 3 terrible days. I don't know, he said. But then you came, and Sam, and for the first time in 22 years, this room has life in it again. A baby breathing. a mother keeping watch, and I think—" His voice broke. He covered his mouth, steadied himself. "I think maybe that's forgiveness. Not words, not prayers. Just life returning to a place that was dead." Ruth rose, walked to him, knelt beside the chair, took his hand. "You're a good man, Silas Thorne. I'm not that—" "You are." She squeezed his hand. "A good man who made bad choices. But you're choosing different now. That counts." Silas looked at their joined hands, rough and scarred and holding on. "When Hargrave comes," he said quietly, "I won't give you up. I know. I'll lose everything. I know. And I still won't give you up." Ruth leaned her head against his knee, exhausted, grateful. "Why?" Silas looked at Sam, at the baby sleeping in his son's cradle, at the lamp burning in the window, the same lamp that had marked 22 years of grief, now lighting the way for something else, something new. "Because I wasn't there when it mattered," he said. "But I'm here now, and that has to mean something." They sat in silence. The lamp burned. Sam breathed. Outside, the snow continued falling, and somewhere on the road from Billings, men were gathering, preparing, coming to take what Mercy had protected. But in the nursery on Iron Creek Ranch, 3 people kept vigil. A man learning to stay, a woman learning to rest, a baby who didn't know he'd save them both. Silas looked at the lamp in the window, thought of all the nights he'd lit it for ghosts. Tonight, he was lighting it for the living. "Whatever comes," he said, we face it together." Ruth nodded against his knee. Together. The word hung in the air, strange, foreign, beautiful. For 22 years, Silas had been alone. Not anymore. They came on the 7th day, 8 riders, federal deputies, by the look of them, hard, men with rifles and warrants and the weight of law behind them. Marshal Hargrave rode at the front. Beside him, a man in a black suit, lawyer, probably, carrying papers. Silas watched from the porch, rifle across his chest. Jack and Will flanking him, Alma standing to his left, face carved from granite. Behind him, through the window, Ruth holding Sam, watching, waiting. The rider stopped at the gate. Hargrave dismounted, walked forward alone, stopped 10 feet from the porch. "Mr. Thorne," he said, voice flat, official. "I'm here under authority of Territorial Governor Preston. I have a federal writ for the arrest of Ruth Carver and the seizure of assets belonging to Silas Thorne for obstruction of justice." He held up the papers, red seal, governor's signature. "Last chance," Hargrave said. "Step aside. Let us take her. You keep your ranch, your reputation, your life." Silas didn't move. "No." "Then I'm authorized to seize this property, cattle, land, buildings, all of it. You'll have 72 hours to vacate." "Can't seize what I don't own." Hargrave's eyes narrowed. "What?" Silas pulled a document from his pocket, unfolded it, held it up. "Deed of transfer. Signed 3 days ago, witnessed by Alma Brennan and recorded at the Territorial Land Office. This ranch now belongs to the Iron Creek Medical Trust. I'm just a tenant." Hargrave's jaw tightened. He turned to the lawyer. The man took the paper, read it, nodded. "Legal," the lawyer said quietly. "Then we arrest you," Hargrave said. "You're coming with us." "For what crime?" "Harboring a fugitive, obstruction of federal authority, interference with—" "All words," Silas interrupted. "No proof. Just a scared man trying to silence a witness." Hargrave's hand went to his sidearm. The deputies behind him shifted, hands moving toward rifles. Silas's finger found his trigger, didn't pull, just rested there, ready. "Don't," Alma said quietly. "Clayton Hargrave, I delivered you. 44 years ago, December cold, just like this, your mother near died, bringing you into this world. I held you, wrapped you, handed you to your father." Hargrave's face flickered, something human, underneath the badge. "Don't shame her memory by doing this," Alma said. "I'm upholding the law. You're murdering a witness. That's, Thomas Vickers is a killer. You know it. The whole territory knows it. And you're here because his uncle paid you to finish what that bullet in Emma Carver's back started." Silence. The deputies looked at each other, uncertain now. Hargrave's face went red. "You have no proof." "I do." A new voice. Everyone turned. A man rode up from the South Road, older, weathered, gray beard. He wore no badge, but carried himself like authority. Like law that meant something. Alma smiled. "About time, Jacob." The man dismounted, walked to the porch, handed Alma a leather satchel. "My brother," Alma said to the deputies. "Retired territorial judge, Jacob Brennan." Judge Brennan looked at Hargrave. "Clayton." "Jacob." Hargrave's voice was tight. "What are you doing here?" "Investigating." Jacob opened the satchel, pulled out papers. "Got word 3 weeks ago about a wrongful hanging in Billings. Carpenter named Daniel Carver. Rush trial. Single witness. Execution inside a month. That case is closed. No, that case was buried. And Jacob held up a document. Witness statement from a hotel clerk. Says he saw Thomas Vickers leaving the scene of the murder, covered in blood. Statement was given to Sheriff Vickers, never filed. Hargrave's face went pale. Jacob pulled another paper. Bank records. Showing a payment of $5,000 from William Vickers to Clayton Hargrave. Dated 2 days after Daniel Carver was hanged. That was a loan. With no terms, no interest, no repayment schedule. Jacob looked at the deputies. Gentlemen, this man isn't here on federal authority. He's here on a payroll. The Vickers family hired him to hunt Ruth Carver, to kill her, to silence the only witness who can testify that Thomas Vickers is a murderer. And the deputies lowered their rifles one by one. They looked at Hargrave. At this man who'd led them here under the banner of law, who'd lied to them, used them. Marshal, one deputy said quietly. Is this true? Hargrave's hand shook on his sidearm. It's not. This isn't. Did the Vickers family pay you? The deputy pressed. Silence. Hargrave looked at the faces around him. At Silas standing firm. At Alma, the woman who delivered him into the world. At his own men backing away. He was alone. This isn't over, he said, voice cracking, desperate. Yes, Jacob said calmly. It is. Hargrave looked at Ruth through the window. At Sam in her arms. At the life he'd been paid to destroy. Then he turned, mounted his horse, rode off. His deputies didn't follow. They stayed, staring at the papers in Jacob's hands. At the truth they'd almost killed for. We didn't know, one said quietly. I know, Jacob replied, but now you do, and you'll testify, all of you, to what Hargrave tried to do here, what the Vickers family tried to cover up. The deputies nodded, ashamed, relieved. They rode off, slowly, quietly, leaving the papers with Jacob. For a long moment no one moved. Then Ruth appeared in the doorway, Sam in her arms, face streaming with tears. Is it over? She whispered. Jacob looked at her. You're Ruth Carver? Yes. And your husband was innocent. The territorial court will hear your testimony. Thomas Vickers will stand trial for murder. He handed her a document. You're free, Mrs. Carver. Officially. No charges, no warrants. You and your son are safe. Ruth's legs buckled. Silas caught her, held her up while she sobbed. While Sam, confused, started crying too. While 22 years of fear and guilt and running finally released. You're safe, Silas whispered into her hair. You're safe now. This time it was true. Then Silas's vision blurred. He felt his chest tighten, sharp, hot, like someone had driven a spike through his ribs. His hand went to his heart. Silas, Ruth's voice, far away. Silas! The ground tilted. Sky swapped places with snow. Strong hands caught him. Jack, Will, Jacob. They lowered him to the porch boards. Alma was beside him instantly, fingers on his throat, listening to his heart. It's weak, she said. The strain, 7 days of this. His heart can't take it. Ruth knelt beside him, Sam in one arm, her hand gripping Silas's with the other. Stay with me, she said. Please, stay. Silas looked at her, at Sam, at the faces gathered around him, people who'd stood beside him when the law came hunting. He tried to speak, couldn't. His chest was fire. Don't try to talk, Alma said. We're getting you inside. But Silas needed to say it, needed them to know. Is he coughed, tasted copper. Is Sam safe? Ruth pressed her forehead to his. Yes, he's safe, because of you. Silas nodded, closed his eyes. Then I did it, he whispered. This time, I stayed. His hand went slack in Ruth's grip. No, Ruth screamed. Silas, no. But Alma was already moving, checking his pulse, breathing for him, bringing him back from the edge. They carried him inside. Laid him on the bed, in the room where he'd slept alone for 22 years. Alma worked over him, herbs, tinctures, steady hands. Ruth sat beside him, holding Sam with one arm, Silas's hand with the other. Is he dying? Ruth asked. Alma didn't answer immediately, just kept working, finally. His heart's weak, damaged, years of grief, guilt, carrying too much alone. She looked at Ruth. But he's strong, stubborn, and he has something to live for now. Will he make it? I don't know. But if he does, he won't be the same man. Ruth looked at Silas's face, pale, peaceful, like he'd finally set down a weight he'd carried too long. Good, Ruth whispered. The old one was broken. She leaned down, pressed her lips to his forehead, whispered so only he could hear. You saved me. Now let me save you. 2 weeks. Silas spent 2 weeks in bed, drifting between sleep and waking. His heart beat slow, too slow, Alma said. like a clock winding down. But it kept beating. Ruth sat vigil, day and night. Sam in a basket beside the bed. She fed Silas broth when he could swallow, water when he couldn't, changed his sheets, washed his face, kept him tethered to the living. You don't have to, Silas whispered on the third day. His voice was paper thin. I know. You're free now. You could go anywhere. I know. Then why stay? Ruth dipped the cloth in cool water, pressed it to his forehead, looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death. Because you stayed for me, she said simply. Now I stay for you. The world outside kept turning. Judge Jacob Brennan stayed in Lewiston building his case. The depositions came quick. The hotel clerk who'd seen Thomas Vickers fleeing the murder scene, the bank records showing payments to Hargrave, the deputies who testified they'd been deceived. On the 10th day, Jacob rode out to the ranch. It's done, he told Ruth on the porch. Thomas Vickers was arrested this morning. Sheriff William Vickers resigned. Hargrave's warrant was revoked. He fled to Wyoming. We'll extradite him. Ruth's hand went to her mouth. It's really over? Your husband's conviction will be overturned, posthumously. Jacob's voice was gentle. It won't bring him back, but his name will be cleared. Ruth closed her eyes. Tears ran down her face. Thank you. Thanks, Silas. He's the one who stood when it mattered. I know. Ruth looked through the window, at the bedroom where Silas lay sleeping. He's still standing, just slower now. Jacob nodded. Alma says he'll live, but he won't be the man he was. Good. That man was dying alone in an empty house. Spring came early. The snow began melting on the 15th day. Water ran in the gutters. Ice broke on the creek. The world turned from white to brown to the first hints of green. Ruth opened all the windows, let the air move through the house, carried Sam from room to room, showing him the light. Silas woke to birdsong. He blinked, disoriented. The room was bright, too bright. Sunlight streamed through windows he'd kept curtained for years. Ruth sat in the chair beside his bed, mending a shirt. Sam slept in her lap, mouth open, tiny fist curled against her chest. You're awake, she said softly. Silas tried to sit up. His body refused. Weak as water. Easy. Ruth set Sam in the basket, helped Silas rise, propped pillows behind him. You've been asleep for 16 hours. What day is it? March 2nd. Silas blinked. Nearly 3 weeks since Hargrave had come. 3 weeks since his heart had tried to quit. Sam? He asked. Safe. Growing? He smiled yesterday. Real smile, not gas. Silas's chest loosened. He looked at the window, at the world beyond, green and living. The snow's gone, he said. Mostly. Ruth sat back down, picked up her mending. Alma says you can try walking tomorrow. Short distances. No work for a month. The ranch. Jack and Will are handling it. Mrs. Chen's feeding everyone. The calves are coming in early this year. 12 born already. All healthy. Silas stared at her. This woman who'd crawled through snow, who'd lost everything, who was sitting in his bedroom like she'd always been there. Why are you doing this? He asked. Ruth looked up. What? Taking care of me, running the house. You could leave. Go anywhere. Start over. Ruth set down the mending, stood, walked to the window, looked out at the melting world. I spent 6 months running, she said quietly. Running from the law, from the truth, from men who wanted me dead. I ran so long I forgot what it felt like to stop. She turned to face him. Then I came here. And you opened the door. And for the first time since Daniel died, someone chose me. Not because I was useful, not because I could pay, just because it was right. Her voice cracked. You gave me a home when I had nothing. You stood against the law when it would have been easier to hand me over. You risked everything, your land, your life, for a woman you didn't even know. She walked to the bed, sat on the edge, took his hand. So, why am I staying? Ruth smiled through tears. Because someone has to teach you how to rest. Someone has to make sure you eat. Someone has to keep the lamp burning so you don't disappear into that locked room again. Silas's eyes filled. Ruth? And because Sam needs a home, and I'm tired of running. And this house, she looked around. At the open windows, the clean floors, the light streaming in. This house was dead when I came, but it's alive now. We made it alive. Silas couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. Ruth leaned forward, kissed his forehead, gentle, familial. Rest, she whispered. I'll be here when you wake. That evening, Ruth went to the nursery. Sam was asleep in the cradle, Thomas's cradle. The one Silas had kept locked away for 22 years. Now it rocked gently, a living child inside. Ruth lit the lamp on the windowsill. The flame caught, steady, golden. She stood there watching it burn. This lamp that had marked Silas's grief for so long. That had been the only light in a house full of darkness. Now it was something else. Not grief, not just hope, redemption. She thought of Emma, of Daniel, of everyone she'd lost. I kept my promise, she whispered to the dark. Sam's safe. He has a home. He has... She stopped, smiled through tears. He has a father, not by blood, but by choice. And maybe that's what matters. Behind her footsteps, Silas stood in the doorway, leaning on the frame, pale but upright. You should be in bed, Ruth said. I needed to see. See what? Silas looked at the lamp, at the flame burning in the window, at the room that had been a tomb, now filled with life. I used to light that lamp for the dead, he said quietly. Every night, for 22 years. I'd stand here and talk to ghosts. He stepped into the room, slow, careful. But tonight, he continued, I'm lighting it for the living. Ruth's breath caught. Silas walked to the window, placed his hand on the glass, clear, warm, open to the world. This lamp, he said, it used to say, I'm sorry. Sorry I wasn't there. Sorry I failed. Sorry I chose wrong. He turned to Ruth. But now it says something different. It says, you're safe here. And it says, come home. It says, his voice broke. Ruth stepped beside him, took his hand. It says we survived, she finished softly. That's what it says. We survived. And we're still here, and the light's still burning. They stood together, two broken people, one broken house, one lamp in the window, and outside the world was green again. Later, Ruth found Silas in the kitchen, eating soup, slow bites, but eating. She sat across from him, Sam in her lap. I got a letter today, she said, from Judge Brennan. About the trial? Yes. Daniel's conviction is overturned. Thomas Vickers is being charged with murder. The trial starts in May. She paused. They want me to testify. Will you go? I have to. I owe Daniel that much. I owe Emma. Silas nodded. When? 2 months. I'd need to be in Helena for a week, maybe 2. Then we'll go. And Ruth looked up. We? You think I'm letting you walk into that courtroom alone? Silas's eyes were fierce. You stood beside me when the marshal came. I'll stand beside you when the judge asks you to speak. Ruth's eyes filled again. She reached across the table, squeezed his hand. Thank you. Besides, Silas said, Sam will need someone to hold him while you testify. Might as well be me. Ruth laughed. First real laugh in months. Light, free. You're a good man, Silas Thorne. I'm a man who's learning to be good. He squeezed her hand back. That's different. They sat in the warm kitchen, spring wind moving through open windows, Sam cooing softly, the lamp burning steady in the nursery window. And for the first time in 22 years, Silas Thorne's house felt like home. 1 year later, spring 1892, the ranch was smaller now. Silas had sold half the land, 6,000 acres to a consortium from Butte, paid off debts, settled accounts. What remained was enough. Good water, strong grass, cattle that knew their names. The house was loud. Sam was walking. 14 months old, sturdy legs, stubborn chin. He'd learned to say sigh before mama, which made Ruth laugh and Silas turn away to hide the wetness in his eyes. This morning, Sam toddled after the chickens, shrieking with joy every time they scattered. Silas followed 2 steps behind, hands ready to catch him. Gentle, Silas said. They're nervous creatures. Sam grabbed a fistful of feathers. The hen squawked, flapped away. Sam sat down hard in the mud, looked betrayed. Silas picked him up. Told you. Sam's face crumpled, about to cry. Then Silas made a chicken sound, low, ridiculous, and Sam laughed instead, grabbed Silas's nose, pulled. Ow, Silas grinned, carried the boy back to the house. Ruth stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching. Her hair was longer now, braided back. She wore a simple dress, blue cotton, practical, and an apron she'd embroidered with wildflowers. You're covered in mud, she said. He's covered in mud. I'm just his transportation. Ruth took Sam, kissed his muddy cheek. Bath for you, little man. Sam babbled something that might have been protest. Silas watched them disappear inside. Stood on the porch, breathing spring air. The world smelled like thaw and new grass and coffee. A year ago, this porch had been a battlefield. Federal marshal. 8 armed men. Papers that could have destroyed everything. Now it was just a porch, sun-warmed, peaceful. He could still feel the weight of his rifle, the choice he'd made, the line he'd drawn. But more than that, he could feel Sam's small hand pulling his nose. Ruth's laugh from the kitchen. Life that had returned because someone had chosen to stay. That afternoon, Doc Alma visited. She came once a week now, checking Silas's heart, watching Sam grow, drinking coffee at the kitchen table like family. He's strong, Alma said, watching Sam stack wooden blocks. Growing like a weed, Takes after his mother, Ruth said. Both of them. Alma glanced at Silas. How's the chest? Fine? Silas. I get tired faster. Can't work long days. Heart skips sometimes. He shrugged. But I'm here. That counts. Alma nodded, set down her cup, looked between Ruth and Silas with the expression of a woman who'd delivered half the county and had opinions about all of it. So, she said carefully, are you two planning to make this official? Ruth's hands stilled on the dish towel. Silas looked at his coffee. Official how? Ruth asked. Marriage? Church? Legal papers? Silence. Then Ruth smiled, small, sad, knowing. We don't need papers to be a family, Alma. People talk, and let them. Alma looked at Silas. And you? Silas met Ruth's eyes across the table. Something passed between them. Understanding, agreement, the knowledge that what they had didn't need a name. I had a marriage, Silas said quietly. Legal, sanctified. And I still failed her. Ruth nodded. I had a husband, good man, legal vows, and they hanged him anyway. So what's left? Alma asked. Ruth looked at Sam, at the boy playing on the floor between them, at the house that had been dead and was now alive. Choice, Ruth said simply. We stay because we choose to, not because a paper says we must. Alma considered this, then smiled. Well, that's honest, at least. It's all we've got, Silas said. Then it's enough. That evening, after Sam was asleep, Ruth and Silas sat by the fire, not speaking, just sitting, comfortable in the silence. Finally, Ruth broke it. Do you still miss her? She asked quietly. Margaret? Silas didn't flinch from the question. Every day. I miss Daniel and Emma. I know. Ruth pulled her shawl tighter. Do you think they'd forgive us for this? For being... She gestured at the room, the fire, the peace. For being happy? Silas was quiet a long time. Then, I think they'd want us to be. Even though we didn't save them? Especially because we didn't save them. He looked at her. We can't bring them back, can't undo what happened, but we can honor them by living, by not letting grief turn us to stone. Ruth's eyes filled. It feels selfish sometimes. To laugh when they can't. To watch Sam grow when Thomas never did, when Daniel never will. It's not selfish, it's survival. Then why does it hurt? Silas reached over, took her hand. Rough palm against rough palm. Two people who'd worked hard for their peace. Because love doesn't end when someone dies, he said. It just changes shape. Becomes something you carry instead of something you hold. Ruth squeezed his hand. You're wiser than you look, Silas Thorne. I'm just older. She laughed, soft, sad, real. They sat until the fire burned low, until the only light came from the lamp in the nursery window, still burning, as it did every night now. Not for grief, not for ghosts, for anyone who needed to find their way home. Sunday, they went to church, small clapboard building on the edge of Lewiston. 30 people maybe, ranchers, shopkeepers, families. Ruth carried Sam. Silas walked beside her, so his heart couldn't take fast anymore, but he was upright, present. People nodded as they passed. Some smiled. A few whispered, not cruelty, just curiosity. That's Silas Thorne, the one who stood against the federal marshal. That's Ruth Carver, the widow, the witness. That's the baby, Samuel, the one she crawled through snow to save. Inside, they sat near the back. Sam on Ruth's lap, playing with her necklace. Silas beside them, hat in his hands. The preacher, old man, kind eyes, spoke about mercy, about choosing compassion when the world demanded vengeance. Silas felt Ruth's shoulder against his, felt Sam's small foot kick his leg, felt something in his chest, not pain this time, but fullness. After the service, they walked home, slow, together, Sam between them, holding both their hands, laughing when they swung him over puddles. Behind them, people watched. Someone said, that's the woman who crawled through the snow. And someone else, and the man who opened the door. Look at them now, a family. Didn't think Silas Thorne had it in him. Love changes people, even old ranchers. Ruth heard the whispers, smiled. They're talking about us, she said. Let them. Does it bother you? Silas looked down at Sam, at the boy swinging between them, at the life they'd built from two separate kinds of grief. No, he said. Let them talk. Let them see what happens when someone chooses to stay. They walked the rest of the way in silence, and when they reached the house, the lamp was burning in the window. Still burning, always burning. Home. Evening. Late spring, 1892. Silas carried Sam to the nursery. The boy was half asleep, thumb in mouth, head heavy on Silas's shoulder. 14 months old and already too big to be called a baby, but still small enough to carry. Silas laid him in the cradle, Thomas's cradle, pulled the christening blanket, Margaret's blanket, up to his chin, watched the boy's eyes flutter closed. Sleep, Silas whispered. Sam's breathing slowed, deepened, gone. Ruth appeared in the doorway, watched in silence, then stepped inside, moved to the window. She lit the lamp, the flame caught, steady, golden, no hesitation. She placed it on the sill, exactly where Silas had set it 23 years ago. Same lamp, same window, different meaning, not grief now, not even hope, just light. Ruth turned, found Silas watching her. She took his hand, no words. They stood together beside the cradle, listening to Sam breathe. After a moment, they left, closed the door, but not all the way, just enough to let the lamplight spill into the hall. Downstairs, they moved through the house, banking the fire, locking the barn, checking the windows. But the front door, they left it unlatched, not wide, just loose enough that anyone pushing would find it open. In case someone needs shelter, Ruth said quietly. Silas nodded. In case someone's crawling through the snow. They went to bed. Two people in a house that had learned to breathe again. Outside, night deepened. The ranch settled into darkness, cattle low in distant fields, creek running over stones. Wind testing the eaves, and in the nursery window, one light, burning steady, unafraid, warm against the cold, a child sleeping safe inside, a door left open, a lamp that says, "You're safe now, come home."